Uh, Good morning, Bahay Ozcakmak from Australia, Brisbane. I think you're based out of. You're the first to be on our series in what we refer to now green mining, and which is a platform that we are launching. And you're the CEO or the managing director of a company called Parkway Minerals. In fact, we met in Munich late last summer when you were not, and then you became shortly after that in October, I guess, you became the managing director of this company after a transaction whereby you brought in basically the private company, the technology company that you had been working on for almost 10 years, and brought it on into a public vehicle, which is Parkway Minerals, which from its let's say origins is an exploration company, but you're slowly kind of developing it towards being a technology platform for, let's say, cleaning brines. That seems to be the core of what you do. And I'm really happy to have you on here because this is a real serious problem for that the industry faces, specifically the mining industry faces. You said the problem is really massive. We're talking about 250 billion liters a day of brine that needs to be treated and is being treated currently with current methods and current technology. So to wrap it up, you've taken on the role of the MD in October. You've since brought in a very recognized engineering partner, and by doing that, you've done two things which I think really important. One is you have validated the technology because there's many small companies that pretend and say they have something unique, but having a partner now like Wally really validates what you have, and also it is a huge step towards being able to market this because you now are able to talk to potential clients, and they will know that Wally is always in the back, and they can provide the upscaling and everything that's needed for that. So the way we would like to do this is have a chat between the two of us, and you can walk through the presentation, and let's walk through the presentation together, and I'll maybe intervene from time to time and ask questions. And at the end of the day, what we want to do is have a Q&A session. So hello, welcome again, Bahay.
Thanks for the introduction, Sven. Yeah, appreciate the opportunity, and congratulations on the launch of green mining. It's my pleasure to be the first presenter on this exciting platform, and I think it's really has quite it's an opportune time with everything that's happening in the world to be able to focus on more sustainable elements of the mining industry. It's a segment of the mining industry that perhaps doesn't get as much attention as it deserves. So thank you again for the opportunity. I guess I'd like to go through the presentation. It's quite long, but perhaps just briefly go through some of the key points, provide a little bit of information about who we are in terms of Parkway Minerals, a little bit about our technology and what we see as the opportunity. So a little bit of information about the disclaimer. Of course, there's certain forward-looking statements that we'll be making throughout the presentation. So essentially, a very brief outline of the presentation, a little bit of an overview of the scale of the opportunity. I'd like to touch on our technology platform and how we believe we're well placed to capture some of that market opportunity. We'll go into some detail about how we're hoping to leverage our technology together with our partners to capture some value. And then we'll go into a few technical details, but generally just a high level overview to introduce your listeners to Parkway Minerals.
So accessing fresh water, clearly with the recent news about forest devastations in Australia, that seems an obvious topic here.
Yeah, no,
yeah.
For sure. I don't think it's any surprise. It doesn't matter where you are. Water challenges seem to be a enduring issue. I think by virtue of population growth and then increasing climate change, whether it's droughts or flooding, it's I think an enduring issue that's only going to become more significant as we move forward. A key point I'd like to make here is some of these large users of water, for instance, the mining industry. There's been a lot of news recently about some of the competing uses of water. An important detail here is less than 5% of the water used by the mining industry is recovered. So this is, I think, a significant opportunity, and we'll go into that in a little bit more detail. But on a daily basis, there's 250 million cubic meters of brine. So brine being salty water produced daily, whether it's from the mining industry, whether it's from the desalination industry. And we see this as an opportunity to process some of these brines, recover some fresh water, but also potentially recover some minerals. And that's the segment that we're most interested in. So recovering fresh water, delivering an environmental benefit, but more specifically, the opportunities where we can recover minerals. That's really our value proposition.
I think we touched on that in our discussion earlier to this call. The number is mind-boggling. I think it translates to something like 30 liters per person per day of brine, of concentrated brine being processed every day.
Yeah, that's right. It's a very significant opportunity. Of course, we won't be targeting anywhere near that scale of opportunity, but there are very, very large, significant segments. So in our particular case, we're targeting high total dissolved salts. So brines that have a very high salt load. So whether it's potash salts, lithium salts, salts where there's recoverable value. And that's only because the opportunity is so significant. We have limited resources. We need to be focused. So very significant opportunities.
So talk about your mission.
Yeah, so essentially having outlined the scale of the opportunity, what we've gone about doing very systematically over the last decade or so is assemble a technology portfolio to very much address this opportunity. So at the core, we have our AIMS technology. We'll be talking about that in a moment. And we've more recently acquired a brine pre-treatment technology, the IBC technology, and a whole lot of know-how. So essentially, we've built this technology portfolio and we're working with partners to be able to deliver brine processing as a solution to industry. So there's large industrial players that are producing, monitoring these waste brine resources. So what we're looking to do is partner with them to find a solution. And we'll go into a bit more detail in the next few slides.
Yeah, I really must say I like that, let's say, neologism or creation of yours, BP, brine processing as a solution that really reminds, of course, and supposed to remind of the software industry. So that's really, I think, something that is different, that differentiates Parkway from certainly being most companies that are in this space, because what you're aiming for effectively is a recurring revenue model, correct?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So we understand very clearly where it excuse me, we understand very clearly where it is we add value, and being able to develop a business model which specifically helps us capture that model, I think, is a key part of the opportunity here. So we're not developing a product that we sell off the back of the truck, a commodity product. This is very much a
Yes.
value-added service we develop in collaboration with a client. The challenges associated with that, the sales cycle, the business cycle, to be able to evaluate an opportunity, demonstrate the value, perform feasibility studies, is longer than delivering a simple product. On the flip side, it's the revenues we generate are of a much more significant and recurring nature, so they're much more valuable. But we'll get into the business model distinction in a moment. But you're right, we're very much focusing the company on being part of the solution.
Okay,
so
let's turn to the, let's say, as on a high level, please, please explain how this is different from existing, let's say, established technology.
Yeah, so we get into where we fit within a processing stream in a moment. I guess essentially the key number here is that 250 billion litres a day you mentioned, Sven. At the moment, a very small proportion of that waste brine is processed routinely. So the reason for that is many of the conventional technologies, so an evaporator or crystallizer, these are very expensive, a whole lot of exotic metals required to build and operate these things. So the cost can exceed $10 per cubic meter. So, you know, very quickly you get a size of this as a very large volume of waste and very expensive to process. So that's the scale of the opportunity. Anything that could be processed readily, so for instance, seawater being processed by reverse osmosis, that's already occurring. Anything that can occur with established technologies already being performed. This remaining brine is essentially brine that's been deemed too uneconomic, too complex to process with those with conventional technologies.
Okay.
So in our particular case, the way we go about processing these brines, we essentially start off with a feedstock. So it could be a waste brine, it could be an industrial stream, it could be a lithium brine from South America. So we take that feedstock, that's number one in the illustration. We process that with our AIMS plant. So keeping in mind, we're not owning these plants, so we're essentially delivering them to the client. They pay for the delivery and ownership and operation of that plant. We're simply the solution provider. As a result of installing an AIMS-based processing solution, we recover pure water, so fresh water that was previously unavailable to the client. It was trapped within that brine stream. And most importantly, we produce high purity salts. So I mentioned earlier about some of these conventional and evaporator crystallizer type technology that can process some of these concentrated brines. Unfortunately, although it's expensive, the product of these processes is essentially a mixed salt, so it's not saleable. In our particular case, we've developed proprietary technology where we're able to still produce salts from these brines, but the key point is these are saleable salts we're producing. So they're in a form which can be sold. So whether it's potash related, lithium related, a whole range of complex salts that can be produced from many of these feedstocks. So that's really the opportunity in processing these waste brines we're most interested in.
And obviously that is economically attractive as well as environmentally beneficial for a client to deal with a waste brine that currently, if they wanted to do that, there's expensive ways of treating it, but then they end up with a non-saleable product that they have to dump eventually or pump underneath the surface. Whereas using your technology provides both cleaning up the water, basically the brine, and resulting into saleable product, which helps, of course, fund the cost of the reprocessing of the waste brine, for example.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, many of the projects we're working on, the dealing with the environmental concerns is an advantage. Producing fresh water is valuable. All these benefits are worthwhile, but none of the projects we're working on are being driven by those factors. They're second order priorities for us. Fundamentally, we're very much focused on enhancing product recovery that's saleable, that's generating value, because from our perspective, the bigger we can grow that pie, we can recover additional product, increase the revenues for the client. It's easier for us to then be able to extract some value from that. So whether it's a processing fee, a tolling fee, a royalty. So what we'd like to do is propose some of these environmental benefits are essentially, you know, bonus features of being able to adopt a new age technology. But fundamentally, at the core of the process, from our perspective, we need to be able to generate revenue and in many cases save the disposal costs. So storing this brine and in many cases not doing anything isn't a free exercise. There's a cost associated with that as well.
Yeah.
So we'll get into some of the details about what a conventional scenario without our technology and what a scenario with our technology may look like in a moment.
But would you go as far as saying that you could turn a cost associated with processing a brine into a profit center even for a client? Or
Oh, very much so. I mean, given the scale of the opportunity we outlined, I mean, there's thousands of opportunities. That's not always going to be the case. So there's opportunities where an industrial operation produces a waste brine. The costs of disposing it aren't particularly onerous. There isn't particularly valuable products to be recovered. We have a technically feasible solution, but we're not commercially interested in that opportunity at this time. So in time, as the technology matures, larger companies are involved, our capacity to deliver many projects concurrently grows, then I think we'll come down that cost curve. But where we are at the moment, we're very laser focused on high value opportunities with large reputable counterparties, where there's no greenfield project development type risks, excuse me, where in many cases there's existing operations. It could be a refinery or a fertilizer plant, or whatever it happens to be, where all the infrastructure, all the feedstock is in place. We just need to add additional circuit to enhance the recoveries, improve the sustainability of the operation, and generate revenues that we can find a way to share and monetize. So that's very much the focus at this stage, Sven.
And just looking at these images, the upscaling as such is always a risk. But I remember from our previous conversations that you said there is that is basically a modular technology where you can deal with different sizes and adapt. And it's already been, let's say, proven. Otherwise, I wouldn't imagine a partner like Worley would have come to the table.
Yeah, look, that's right. That's right. So we built a pilot plant in late 2018, early 2019 that assisted us deliver a scoping study for one of our projects. And as part of a pre-feasibility study that we've recently announced, we'll be building a state-of-the-art, highly sophisticated pilot plant Our partners are assisting in terms of design, vendor qualification, um, procurement and construction sort of approaches that are consistent with what an engineering company would use to deliver a commercial solution. So that's very much seen as using commercial equipment from industry leading vendors to be able to initially validate the technology in a pilot plant, but to give us the confidence that we can go and deliver these things on scale. So whilst we're in the process of building a scaled up pilot plant, we're concurrently designing a skid mounted unit, and this unit will essentially be a deployable unit. So a particular client may require 3 or 6 or 10 of these skids. So it becomes very easy to visualize what's the footprint, what's the operating performance, what's the cost of this unit. So that's a very important stepping stone in the commercialization process. So I think we touch on a few of these topics in the next few slides.
I agree. So basically, you think you're being able to provide this those units by the second half of this year? Is that what you're aiming for?
So the pilot plant is scheduled for August construction to be complete, commissioning in September. And in many ways, we're calling it a pilot plant, but in many ways, this is a reconfigurable plant to test different configurations, different equipment. So that's the sort of timeline to be operational. In the meantime, we're evaluating a range of other projects where we've completed piloting on our existing pilot plant, and we'll take that through the commercialization process. One of the, I mentioned the pre-feasibility study. One of the key objectives of this study is it will deliver a third-party designed AIMS processing plant. So in terms of what the energy consumption, what the layout, what the key equipment, the crystallizer, key components of a plant, and will provide us and our partners with confidence that these plants can be designed, they can be, they're economic, there's an effective capability, which is why it's been important for us not to rush to form partnerships with groups for the sake of it. This has been a decade-long journey, so it's been very important to ensure the partners we're working with, both from an engineering, from an equipment supply, the engineering team we're building, all large company EPC backgrounds that give us the credibility to deal with major end users, that we can in fact take your brine, we can run it in a pilot plant, we can demonstrate this works, we can engineer we can perform a feasibility study, which the client pays for in collaboration with our partners. And should the project stack up, then our engineering partners transition to delivering the technology. So this isn't a R&D exercise, and that's really what's led us to.
It's important to point out that you're moving out of R&D now and basically to monetizing the technology, and a stepping stone for that is the pilot plant that you're currently building, because it will ultimately allow you to do live testing with real product being sent to you. You process it, you show your future client that it works or how it works. And if they're, let's say, happy with the results, they know that this same plant can be upscaled or replicated at their own site, for example. That's how this is going to be working in the future.
Yeah, no, that's right. So our existing pilot plant already enables us to test, and we've performed significant number of studies on third-party projects already. But you're right, the pilot plant we're building now is very much of a scale and caliber that will be able to answer many of those scale-up related questions. And fortunately, the engineering team we've assembled since the beginning of the year has enabled us to understand what those requirements are to be able to scale this plant up.
As far as I remember, you really were able to secure some really high caliber guys from very reputable firms, and that, to me at least, as an investor, is also always an indication that yeah, it's validating your plan really. Besides having entered a deal with Wally, those type of people joining the company and taking the risk of going with a startup company, if you want, is very comforting.
Yeah, look, for sure, Sven. So I guess having outlined the opportunity and where it is that we want to be focusing our efforts in terms of delivering a solution, a key component for building a technology company, we need to establish a source of sustained competitive advantage. So why should a major mining company engage us to deliver a solution? What is it we do better? And how is it that we can perform a solution that cannot be delivered using conventional technologies? So what we've essentially done is we've established this a portfolio of these proprietary processing technologies. So pre-treating the brine, processing the brine, a whole bunch of know-how around that. So we don't want to solve all the world's challenges, but when it comes to a very specific concentrated brine, we want to establish ourselves as a market leader. And what we want to do is use this technology platform, if you will, along with an innovative business model. So we're not looking to sell kit. What we're doing is looking to sell a solution to our clients.
Good.
And ultimately, that's where the brine processing as a solution comes from. So if we look at the graphic on the right-hand side, essentially we have a client. They have a source of brine, whether it's a desalination plant, a potash mining project, solution mine. What we do is we're the process technology package provider. So we pilot, design a plant, we can do online simulations and very quickly confirm that we can deliver a solution. We work with our partners to deliver a feasibility study. And once that project transitions from the evaluation feasibility stage to delivery, we then hand over that project opportunity to our preferred engineering partner. And we'll get to the relationship with Wally in a moment. But what's really exciting about that relationship, we've been able to agree to a very synergistic relationship where we can, with all confidence, hand over that project. But as a small company, there's an innovative revenue sharing model. So I can't go into all the details, but we share not just in the work we do, but the revenues that are generated as a result of adopting our technology. So for a small company of our size, that's quite a I think an endorsement of really the value we can add here.
Yeah, I think what's worth emphasizing as well is, and you pointed out later in your presentation, but that this is a business model that is light on capital in a way, because you are not in this pitfall like a lot of let's say mining related companies, to go through a huge capital expenditure, and because the plant, for example, that eventually gets built is not paid by Parkway, but is funded by let's say the owner of the project, and you even participate in any engineering being done or surrounding that build up. Plus, of course, your ultimate goal is to be a kind of a royalty, tapping into a royalty stream from the continued benefit that you provide.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think very much the attraction of the technology is for the incremental capex. So if you have and we get into a case study in a moment, but if you have a project that's generating 100 units of production, and you can come in with some incremental capex by increasing the capex of the project by 2 or 5%, but then you can enhance the revenue of that project by another 5 or 10%. You're not to generate that additional revenue, you're not having to purchase more feedstock. You're not having to run a separate mine. You're not having to build another evaporation facility. So the real incremental return you can generate through these efficiencies is really quite attractive. And there's actually a business model that industrial technology solution providers. So this is, it's an established process, but for us as formerly a small scale exploration company transitioning to a technology company, it appears a little novel, which is why we're taking the market on this journey of explaining, how this is different, but in an industrial setting, this is actually quite a common process.
Yeah.
So I guess in terms of just at a high level, in simple terms, to sort of outline what these advantages are, I think we've covered these at a high level, Sven, but essentially the scenario down the bottom is a conventional process where you have a source of brine, an aqueous solution. You process it with a conventional technology. You happen to recover product, which is great, but then you're generating a solid and liquid waste, which, because you can't sell that product, you now have to pay to store it somewhere, to monitor it. There's a whole range of liabilities associated with that.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, our business model involves, or our value proposition rather, involves processing those solid and liquid wastes and recovering the water fraction, which makes operations more sustainable, but more importantly, additional product and or byproducts, which generates value. That's the key advantage of being able to process these brine streams from a business perspective, at least.
Yeah. It almost this sounds like too good to be true. It's a solution that I think a lot of mining companies would wish for, because they're faced with this ongoing environmental costs, and it's really amazing to think that you can really from a dissolved brine generate pure water and recover the product. I know it might be a little far-fetched, but why? How can you do that? And other technologies have failed in doing that. I imagine there's been a lot of research going into this. I remember that the origins of what your technology is about comes from desalination plants, and is ultimately a membrane based technology. But without giving away any trade secrets, I think it's important to understand why you can do what others are failing at doing.
Yeah, look, essentially for a long time, a lot of these brines, because it was cheaper to just re-inject these waste brines, or a desalination plant to send the brine out to sea, there was no pressure to specifically focus on these. They haven't been the focus of intense research. There are conventional processes such as evaporation crystallization, for instance, that I referenced, but they have their own both capex challenges, and also the product they're producing is not particularly valuable. For us, the origins, that's right, come from desalination, but our partners at Victoria University 10 years ago embarked on a process where everyone was looking at desalination technologies. These guys started focusing on the brine that was being produced from the desalination industry. So they developed a whole range of IP.
Mm-hmm.
And without going too far into the history, at a similar time, sort of 10 years ago, I was doing some work in the geothermal industry, pulling out minerals out of hot brine to be able to operate the plant. So in that particular case, that power plant had lost 3 megawatts, half its rated output, because all sorts of minerals were forming within the plant. Mm-hmm. So we came up with novel ways to recover these minerals, and we eventually came up with a method that we not only did we pull these compounds out of the brine, we did it in a manner that these products were saleable. So there's a whole range of our own background IP from Victoria University, a whole bunch of co-developed IP. So it has been a journey. But I guess in terms of again, there's a little bit of detail on this slide here, but essentially the point I would make is, starting on the left, you start off with a brine and aqueous solution. There's a range of pre-treatment processes. And then typically you'd put that brine through, for instance, a reverse osmosis plant. The vast majority of desalination technologies utilize this technology.
Mm.
The benefit is you recover half the fresh water from seawater, for instance, and you have more fresh water. The difficulty is for every litre of fresh water you produce, you've now got a litre of waste brine that you didn't have before you embarked. So there's no free lunch here.
Yes.
To date, there hasn't been a penalty for processing that brine sort of up until the last couple of years. But increasingly, whether it's in Chile, whether it's in California where regulations are tightening up, this is something that needs addressing.
Yes.
And from our perspective, we feel we have the right technology at the right time to really provide a solution. So in this particular case, whilst we could still utilize reverse osmosis, we then take this brine and we process that further and recover saleable salts and limit that disposal related cost. So that's from a water treatment perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Down the bottom, we contrast the technology with, of course, whilst we're processing waste brine streams,
Yes.
fundamentally, given we're recovering minerals, there's some similarities with the mining industry with what we're doing, and many of the applications are in the mining industry. So in the table down the bottom, we're effectively contrasting our technology with, let's say, a flotation process. So something that could be used in the potash industry, for example. So this is a conventional technology. It works reasonably well. It doesn't recover byproducts. It's been around for 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. And up until recently, okay was good enough. Now, given the process relies on reagents, given the recoveries are relatively poor, being able to apply a new technology such as our AIMS technology enables us to improve those recoveries, make these operations more sustainable. So there's really these are sort of next generation. Our technology is essentially a next generation technology to perhaps address some of these challenges that have been around a while, but they weren't as pressing as perhaps they are these days.
I get it. Let's the way I would try to recap this is saying the problem as such wasn't probably as pressuring because there wasn't such a cost attached to basically getting rid of waste brine, but that pressure is mounting, and that's where you're providing a really timely solution, right? And even going further, not just reducing waste, but turning waste into a saleable product.
Yeah, that's right, Sven. So essentially, we've touched on the business model and how we're utilizing the technology to be able to create value. Essentially, this brine processing as a solution approach we touched on enables us to focus very much on opportunities where we can add value. So we've provided a illustrative example here. So it's just conceptual to essentially, provide the market with some a case study perhaps on what an incremental project would look like. And what we've done is we've normalized the costs to a nominally a $100 million project on the left-hand side.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how much it costs to build this project, this theoretical project. And in this particular case, to be able to provide a brine processing as a solution bolt onto this project, we're nominally indicating the cost for that may be $18 million. So whilst this isn't an actual example, we've been through enough projects over the last few years that we understand the relative value add, how we can capture value, what the relative costs are. So this is a bit of a guide, if you will. So in the base case, this $100 million project, for an additional $18 million, so that's how much the cost of delivering our solution is going to cost the client.
Yes.
Previously, the project was generating, for instance, $47 million a year in revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And because we're recovering additional product, so this could be a refinery, for instance, where
Yeah.
nickel and cobalt is going out to tails because it's not being recovered, or it could be a potash or lithium project. So any product we recover, given there's no feedstock associated cost, that additional revenue essentially goes straight to the bottom line. There isn't an additional power generation plant. There isn't additional infrastructure required. So that's really flows straight onto earnings.
Mm-hmm.
And similar in the disposal element. So some of these projects have a brine disposal cost. So they build an evaporation pond, they have to line it, they have to monitor it. There's a cost associated with that. And by processing that brine, you're now saving that money, you're foregoing that cost. So essentially that saving, once again, flows straight to your bottom line.
Yes.
So if we were to compare the scenario on the left, the base case,
Mm-hmm.
with a theoretical aims-based scenario, essentially what we're doing is increasing the earnings of that project by, in this case, $16 million a year. So putting aside sort of the short payback and those sorts of comparisons, let's just look at it on a complete sort of a return on invested capital type basis. So this project that previously generated $23 million a year in earnings is now generating $39 million a year in earnings. So by working with us and our partners, by providing the solution, the brine processing solution, what we've done, what we've done is we've built in a earning stream now of $16 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on how we got involved in this project, depending on the final investment decision commitments that were made by the client. So if they've paid for all the feasibility studies and the business development,
Mm-hmm.
there's a negotiation process here. But essentially, our base case involves, as a result of working with us, we're going to deliver our client this additional earning stream. And what we would seek to do is share in that value creation. So we're not asking the client to share some of the money, some of the earnings that it was already generating. What we're doing is creating this new earning stream.
Yeah.
And we're suggesting that as the solution provider, we, together with our engineering partner, should share in 5, 10, 20% of whatever that additional earning stream is. And keeping in mind, this is a proprietary solution. You can't go and get a generic version of this. So that's why the intellectual property, the capability that we've developed over the last few years becomes...
Bottom line is, your proposal to the client is make more money and be environmental more responsible, but share that additional profit partially with ongoing with Parkway and your engineering partner. And that's basically this light green fraction of the additional profit generated, and that's impressive. It makes total sense, I think. And then over time, you just projected that you would add projects because those are ongoing royalty type actually payment streams that that the company wants to build up.
That's absolutely right. So in this particular example, that share we're talking about, we're generating $16 million a year in earnings at the top end of what we're hoping to extract from these projects. That earning stream for Parkway, maybe $2 or $3 million a year from that one project. And to put that into context, given we're not involved in funding the feasibility study, we're not building this plant ourselves, we're not deploying our balance sheet. For a small company to develop a pathway to that sort of revenue stream, that's essentially project one, where cash flow break even. And really, that's why getting the foundations is so important, because once you validate the business model, you have a credit-worthy counterparty, you've delivered your feasibility study, and the client wishes to progress. You're right. In time, we're hoping to build a whole portfolio of these sorts of opportunities where our costs...
Ich kann jetzt nicht gerade, ja? Entschuldigung. Okay, sorry for this interruption.
So just to continue, essentially, what was very important about getting a engineering partner that we could grow with, essentially, given we're the solution provider, we're not going out there and building these things. We're able to, in time, be able to advance a number of projects. We're not going to be people constrained, capital constrained. So really, once we validate the business model, I think the opportunity to be able to generate some momentum and the pathway to free cash flow, I think is quite attractive. And I think the market understands that once you've got some visibility on earnings, that business model is being validated.
Yeah.
I expect the market will respond accordingly. And I think some of the announcements we've made, I think particularly in the last couple of weeks, start pointing to the direction we're headed. And really, I think we're at the point where we'll be generating, I think, some significant momentum as we tick off some remaining milestones.
Yeah, and I would imagine that with your first project being realized, that will attract a lot of attention by peers in the industry. And maybe also the pressure on them is increasing to to do it as well, because also the regulators will understand that there's a new technology available that is able to avoid certain waste streams. So I think the regulations might eventually also work in your favor. The question really is, how fast do you think you can basically come up with the first showcase of this technology being implemented on a large scale? I know you're working on the pilot plant, but these things usually, well, they take time. A new plant needs to be built, and your technology needs to be integrated. That's not something that's being done within weeks. It's probably more something like 6 months, 12 months periods.
Yeah, no, look, that's right. There is a gestation period for these projects, a de-risking process. So essentially, just to walk through the process very quickly, when first evaluating an opportunity, we have very tight screening criteria. So the counterparty, the scale of the opportunity, the value proposition. So there has to be visibility on earnings. So this particular scenario, you could see it's a very easy sell for a client to address all these issues and achieve a 1.5 year payback. So they're the sorts of things we screen very early. We then progress to a bench scale piloting evaluation. So what we like to do is, in a matter of weeks, demonstrate to the client, yes, we can. There's no magic here. We can, in fact, process your brine. This is the product that's produced. This is the chemical analysis, the particle size distribution, all those key parameters. And then we transition to a commercial discussion. So to advance this technology further, we need to perform a feasibility study. This is the timeline. This is the budget to be able to perform that. So we're at that stage with a number of projects at the moment. So several substantial companies in a range of different sectors, different geographies. But importantly, we haven't been able to advance that up until now. So as you mentioned earlier, we've only just built this engineering team. We've only just entered into an engineering partnership. We are working with a number of key industry OEMs, key equipment manufacturers that we're forming partnerships with. Some we've worked with for several years. We haven't provided the market with details to date. That's all part of the platform to provide the clients with credibility that we can, in fact, pilot your technology. We can, in fact, deliver a feasibility study. So Wall is assisting us with they're the study manager for our internal Karinga Lakes pre-feasibility study. But the purpose of the strategic partnership is that they would be the study manager for third-party projects. So this isn't Parkway delivering a feasibility study. We can deliver this project. This is a globally significant engineering company leading the feasibility process, with the expectation that the project stacks up and the client's interested, the project would transition to that project delivery phase. So in terms of lead times, this is very much the next few months is about that capability development, so we can even take on projects like that. So to date, we haven't been able to. We've been at the stage where we can perform piloting studies, perform some very basic techno-economic studies, but we haven't had a product to sell. Where we are at the moment with Worley, we've developed very sophisticated process simulation studies, very detailed techno-economic and process design type capabilities. So we're really at the stage where some of these projects that we've been working on over the last few years, we can really advance to the stage where within a month's time or 6 weeks' time, we can formally put forward a comprehensive proposal. This is what it will cost to deliver this feasibility study. Given these are brownfield projects, that may be a 3 to 6 month process. And at the end of that process, there will be a decision. Does the project progress to detailed engineering study, project sanction, etc.? So relatively short lead times from where we are.
Well, you say relatively short lead times. I understand you're now really able to talk on a very detailed engineering level with your potential clients that you already sometimes know for a long time, because they've probably followed the trajectory of what AIM's technology evolution has been. But previously you were more into R&D. Now you have the tools with Worley in hands to really sit at the table with those clients and talk to them at eye level and really put a proposal on the table. And if they, for example, this could be one of those showcases. I can't imagine any company that would say no to a proposition where they can just increase their earnings. So by a factor of basically 30% or something like that. That's something. It's almost an economical must to say yes.
I mean, there are very similar opportunities occurring in terms of managing energy in energy-intensive industries, whether it's recycling reagents, whether it's more efficient use of different feedstocks. So the idea of process optimization is not particularly novel. We just happen to have a very specific technology to address a very specific problem. And we've methodically gone through a process where we've developed this platform with credible people, credible partners, tackling significant issues. So it's very, very methodical process. And in terms of the timing, we've kept this private to date because this technology wasn't sufficiently mature. The reason we've made a decision a year ago and embarked on the process to end up in a public company to be able to pursue this is we felt now was the time. The process is sufficiently mature.
I think it boils back to the question you raised, I think, in the order of $3.5 million early this year, and will those funds enable you to go through to basically have a first generate a first revenue stream, or how long will that fund let's say last for you? I think given that your, let's say, run rate or burn rate isn't what is it that
So I understand the question. So essentially the capital raising closed New Year's Eve, 4 p.m. New Year's Eve, Sven, at $2.8 million. And those funds were raised very much to deliver the 2020 business plan. So the 2020 business plan was based on building a internal engineering capability. So setting up an engineering office, recruiting process engineers, advancing our business development activities, pursuing our strategic partnership discussions, and advancing a number of commercial opportunities. That's what the objectives were. Sitting behind that was delivering a pre-feasibility study. Less to do with the project and more to do with the capability development. So every day our engineers are dealing with Worley's engineers. They're designing equipment, they're designing processes, coming up with equipment designs. So that's really a critical part of the business plan. So the funds we raised will fully deliver the 2020 business plan. So obviously there's a sequence we have to go through. So being able to advance projects is based on having an engineering partner in place. Having an engineering partner in place is based on having an engineering team. So there's a whole sequence of critical path we're working our way through. But for where we are, we're sufficiently well funded to the point where we flag to the market that this is a non-deal roadshow presentation. We're not in the market to raise any funds anywhere near the price where we are at the moment.
Good.
So we're just. I mean, we've spoken about Worley a little bit. For those who don't know, Worley has roughly 60,000 people around the world. Operates in I think 50 countries. Australia's largest engineering services provider. Very well-known company. From our perspective, when we had a range of different partnership opportunities, what we really liked about Worley is in recent years, they've transitioned their business from a company that was delivering majority of their earnings was from lump sum turnkey projects. So they were delivering large infrastructure projects to now that percentage has reduced significantly, and now a larger proportion of their earnings is from services and incremental capex, so smaller capex projects where they're capturing more significant value. So that sort of business model we outlined earlier, there's a lot of fits with the direction Worley's going in. The particular structure of the agreement's confidential. It's probably inappropriate to get into too many details until we put out a joint press release in coming weeks. There's discussions focused on that at the moment. But I think the key components to focus on that we did announce is this is a global agreement. There's mutual exclusivities on both parties, not just on Parkway. So how the parties must capture certain opportunities and work collaboratively globally. And importantly, there's an important revenue sharing model. So all the revenue we generate from early stage piloting, scoping, we perform that work, we generate those revenues, we keep those funds. But importantly, as the projects transition to delivery, Worley's performing that work, Worley's getting paid, but we share in that revenue. So for a small company our size to be aligned with a large company that enables us to evaluate, deliver these sorts of projects when feasible globally, but then be able to benefit through the rollout of the technology, I think is really quite remarkable. And I think we're very fortunate to have the confidence of Worley, have a great working relationship with them, but importantly, that alignment where both parties are aligned to support the commercialization of the technology, to perform business development jointly and advance these projects. Whereas these agreements often can be, MOUs and all very well intended, but it's very difficult to generate traction. Whereas we've tried to flag to the market, this is beyond a high level, we want to be friends. This is very much focused on evaluating projects, developing the technology to a stage where it can be rolled out and transitioning to project delivery. So a lot of effort went into it, but I think it's a great deal for both parties.
And I think the real takeaway is that you don't, it allows you to tap into cash flow way earlier than waiting for a royalty stream, which is certainly the building out the company is going to be the most important, but being able to tap into let's say service payments that are attached to engineering already at an early stage is really, I think, significant for Parkway.
No, most definitely. I think there's lots of opportunities there to recover costs,
Yeah,
cover overhead. That's right. It's not going to be enough to move the needle as opposed to
yeah,
landing a $3 million a year recurring earning stream. But certainly, if you can
yeah,
minimize your corporate burn, we're only a small team, so you're not having to tap the market every 3 months. I think that's certainly an important part of the value proposition. Key
good.
component here as well is all the IP is owned by us. So the current IP, developed IP, and this is again very important from a perspective of building a significant technology company.
Just one little question. How long did it take Wally to fully evaluate your technology? A couple of months?
Look, we've been in, the discussions with Worley were sort of over a year or so. So a very involved
So
process.
they've obviously went to the site, checked everything out, and if it hadn't been to their, let's say, if they hadn't seen the opportunity, they would not have gone for that agreement with you. And the one thing that I recall from that contract that you signed, or that press release back then, is that basically Wally has already certain ideas and applications in mind entering that agreement and bringing them to the table. I think that that's really a huge advantage, because for you as a small company to open all those doors is so time consuming. Now you're sitting there along with Wally, and they're just, putting propositions in front of you and in front of their clients.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in short, it just provides us with increased bandwidth to be able to
Yeah,
identify, evaluate, advance a broader range of projects in a more credible manner than we could ever hope to do on our own.
yeah,
And importantly, so for instance, if we're evaluating multiple projects and we're delivering multiple feasibility studies, that's the sort of stuff that small companies just couldn't hope to do. And importantly, this isn't just a study manager initiative. Importantly, Wally clearly has the capabilities to be able to, delivering
yes,
multi-billion-dollar projects. So for them to be delivering projects of this scale, relatively small, incremental capex, high value, absolutely, I think is consistent with both companies' objectives. I guess in terms of the pre-feasibility study, I don't really want to spend a whole amount of time on this. Essentially, it's a project we own 15% of. It's an Australian potash project in Central Australia. Roughly $10 million has been spent to date in drilling out the resource. So there's no resource evaluation work required. So from our perspective, being able to deliver a pre-feasibility study on this project was a great opportunity, because we could design a plant from scratch and demonstrate, compared to a previous there's a number of pre-feasibility and historical scoping studies being performed on the project.
yeah,
The project's relatively small and was a little complicated to get off the ground as a conventional project. Based on work we did a year or 18 months ago in a scoping study, we're able to demonstrate, using innovative technology, we can simplify this project. We don't need a reverse osmosis plant. We don't need a freshwater bore field. We don't need gas to produce process steam. So
mm,
in many ways, this is a nice internal showcase where we've agreed to deliver a pre-feasibility study. Importantly, the vast majority of the money goes towards building a pilot plant, performing a whole range of engineering studies, incidentally, to do work that we needed to do anyway to be
yeah,
able to scale up this technology. So in many ways, we took this as a great kickoff project with the Worley team.
mm,
Let's design this project together. Let's develop our process models. Let's qualify our vendors.
mm-hmm,
Let's package this up and demonstrate this project makes sense, which is great. And we acquire equity in the project.
mm,
But by no stretch of the imagination are we pursuing this project, because that's our flagship. In many ways, this is a nice launch pad, because at the end of this process, we now will have a design plant, we would have embedded our relationship, we would have qualified vendors, and we've already received interest over the last 6 or so months on projects, for example, in North America, where they want to develop a similar scale project as a pilot plant. Can we provide our designs and help them develop a solution mine in the US, for example? And as a result of delivering what's very similar to what we're doing in Australia, we would again impose a royalty on that project, life of mine. So it's really a very cost-effective way to advance the technology, build some foundations, and help us get to where we need to get to.
I agree. I think going back to the start of our conversation, I said you are about to turning previously an exploration company into a more technology-based company. This is Karinga Lakes is so to speak a heritage from that exploration company previously, and it's interesting to see for me how it's now how things have changed since, let's say, half a year ago, when your presentation was still more in line with surrounding exploration. This is now almost not a confusion or a distraction, but it needs to be explained. This is not your core project anymore, but it is still a great showcase for what you can do, and it helps you basically demonstrate with Worley the viability of your technology at scale, right? That's what you're doing here.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you were asking, Sven, about how long till you roll out the technology, I outlined we'd need to develop AIMS skid-mounted units. We'd need to develop control systems. We'd need to develop layouts. A lot of that work that we would have to do for a client anyway. And of course, it will change from project to project, but this is the opportunity to develop a lot of these standardized designs. So this is the sort of engineering discipline that, working with a credible partner with our internal engineering team, really helps us transition to sort of a project delivery type capability.
So all of the work done, all the experience gained is one for one transferable to let's say future projects with clients. That's pretty much the takeaway from this.
Yeah, look, that's a great summary. That's right. And I think just to sort of, we've been very successful in securing government grants, given how novel the technology is, how disruptive it is, and the benefits it can deliver for industry in Australia in particular. So just to sort of illustrate that point, this pilot plant we're designing at the moment, or is under construction at the moment, $600,000 or $700,000 cost to be able to design, procure key equipment, construct, and test this pilot plant for several months. And out of this $700,000 cost, essentially our net cost to Parkway, our remaining cost, is just under $80,000. And this is really a function of the way we've been able to structure these transactions, how we've been able to leverage R&D funds, and in return for all this, we actually acquire equity in the project. So we structure this in such a way that it just made sense to progress with the PFS. At the end of it, we get pilot plant, we get all this engineering studies, we earn equity in the project, our expenditures are eligible for R&D refunds, etc. So it just made a whole lot of sense for where we happen to be right at the moment. So I won't go into sort of the pilot plant in a whole lot more detail.
The nice thing is you have a budget of way over $1 million, of which you are owed less than 10%, way less than 10%, even closer to 5 or 6%. But you're still getting all the benefits of the work that's being performed. Right? That's great.
Yeah, look, that's right. So I think it was on the Friday we came out announcing, that we've entered into this great partnership deal with an engineering partner, and I think the market sort of recognised, this is one of those key milestones in the de-risking of the company and the technology. And I think that might have been on the Friday, and we came out on the Monday and said, by the way, the first project we're kicking off is a PFS. And because we didn't provide the market with some guidance, I think the market took that to mean, these guys are going to spend a few $1,000,000 as an exploration company. They're going to need to raise a whole lot of money,
Yeah.
which is why we felt the need to come out and provide some clarification. This
Mm.
is a comprehensive program. It has
Yeah.
a significant gross budget, but the net budget to Parkway, inclusive of the pilot plant, inclusive of the feasibility study, is under $600,000,
Yeah.
fully budgeted in our 2020
Yeah.
business plan. So essentially, on a shoestring budget, being able to deliver this level of work program, acquiring equity,
Yeah.
building capability,
Mm.
and moving forward, I think really provides a little bit of a sense of the owner mentality
Yes.
of the sort of company where we're looking to build at Parkway. Once again, this is a new technology we acquired earlier this year, essentially a oil and gas type opportunity where there's these coal seam gas projects in Australia. They have to remove water from the coal seams to be able to access the gas, except dealing with these waste brine streams has been one of the biggest roadblocks to getting the existing projects off the ground and getting new projects off the ground. There's a cost associated with it. There's an environmental burden. So this has been a very problematic area, and a particular technology, patented technology, was developed several years ago, and it essentially enabled the brine that was being produced to be pre-treated. It changes the composition of the brine, and then it enables it to be processed downstream with another technology, such as our AIMS technology. So this is a integration of technologies. The inventor of the technology actually approached us, recognizing that this would be a great fit. After we did our due diligence, recognized that this made a whole lot of sense.
Okay.
So essentially the founder of the company agreed to take Parkway shares as the consideration. He's joined the team in a part-time consulting capacity. We've acquired his pilot plant, and really we're really well kitted out to specifically, in parallel, commercialize this technology. And once again, we were very careful not to be distracted by what our core mission is, but this just made too much sense. We're building a capability here, so when we approach prospective clients, we can demonstrate, we can pre-treat your brine, we can process your brine, we can simulate that, we can pilot that, we can put that into a techno-economic study, we can really deliver you this brine processing as a solution. So that was really quite a left field sort of development, but I guess when you're focused on a very narrow field, these things emerge, and you need to be decisive. So
Yeah,
this I think was
makes
a great opportunity.
Makes a lot of sense for both parties. One is you expand your reach of the potential projects that you can tap into, and the guy that sold this to you certainly has a way better leverage, because he knows that your time to market is probably way faster than he would have ever been able to get to.
Yeah, that's right. And also being able to, I mean, the owners of these coal seam gas projects, national oil companies, global, Shell, PetroChina, etc., significant companies. So to be able to demonstrate to them that you have a process that works, you need to have credible process simulation capabilities, all the sort of capabilities that we've developed already. This is our core competency. So we're really well positioned to be moving that technology forward.
All right.
Just to get to some of the corporate details very quickly, essentially we have a large number of shares on issue. The last traded price, we have a roughly $13-14 million market capitalization. Our largest shareholders are a small listed fund out of Canada, LBI, and myself. We own roughly an eighth of the company each. And importantly, a lot of our associates have been involved in the various capital raisings. So insiders and associates essentially control 60% of the register. So despite the large number of shares on issue, relatively tight register. In terms of funding, we have no debt. We don't like debt. And despite delivering significant work programs, we have roughly just over $2 million in the bank as of our last audited quarterly financials. And in terms of separately, we have a small, or rather a strategic investment in a German potash company, Davenport, where our shares are worth roughly $1.7 million. So for a small company, we think we're well resourced to get on with the job of commercializing these technologies.
Yeah.
And in terms of just very quickly looking at the share price performance when this transaction was consummated middle of last year, we raised the $2.8 million just before year end 2019. We generated some great momentum, sort of at $1 million a day in shares transact. So a lot of interest in what we're doing. As we got about building the business, building the team, not a whole lot of news flow combined with COVID. We had a low volume sell down that, really took us down to some pretty, I think, incredibly low sort of valuation. And then as we've recently emerged with a little bit more news flow in terms of, by the way, these things we said we're going to be doing, forming partnerships, working on projects, are actually occurring. Some of those took a little bit longer than perhaps we'd hoped, but we're in the business of building a significant company here. So I don't think we want to be rushed in making suboptimal decisions for the sake of getting an announcement out a week or two earlier.
Yeah, I get it. Taking you up by the term significant company, obviously as the MD and a major shareholder, you must have let's say, a vision for where you want to be, not really in 1 year, 5 year, probably 5 years is even more interesting. Where do you want to be in $100 million revenue range? Is that a realistic number, or what are you targeting? Without giving any guarantees, of course, but you must have an idea.
Yeah, look, absolutely. I mean, it's as a public director, it can be a little difficult to sort of articulate some of these numbers, but I guess just at a very high level, again, clearly not any forecast, but a couple of, I think, key logical targets I think you've sort of touched on. You can see we have a number of options that are issued that have a 2-cent exercise price. These were associated with recent capital raisings. There's also some partly paid shares that have a similar exercise price as well. Essentially, I'm one of the largest holders of those as well. Essentially, I think that's an important milestone. So assuming we get the share price to 2 cents, that would represent roughly a $40 million market cap. Options are in the money. If we execute some of the milestones that we're out to achieve, I don't think that's a unreasonable near-term target. And I think looking a bit further afield, once there's visibility, several feasibility studies that are pointing to evaluation of projects that will, subject to satisfactory feasibility, transition to the delivery phase, that essentially locks in a recurring revenue stream. Once there's some visibility on that, that's the time institutions really like getting involved in these things. They can see that you're building a business that's going to have, growing earnings. So at that stage, at some point, to get to, say, you mentioned $100 million, that would equate with a capital raising by then to, say, a 5-cent share price. So from where we are today, that's the sort of opportunity we're looking at, 3 to 5, 6 times where we are at the moment, upon us executing on these milestones, of course.
Yes.
We've made some, I guess a key point here, Sven, on this slide here, without listing all the details. Essentially, 6 months ago, I became the managing director of this company. We've announced a number of corporate developments, partnerships, acquisitions. We've built some capability. I won't list, I won't go through all those at the moment, but I think a key thing to outline here is each of these are very methodical steps on taking us from where we've come from to where we want to be. a technology solution provider in this space. And if you look at some of the guidance we've provided the market, what's our business development pipeline look like at the moment? This isn't exhaustive, but you can see the scale of these opportunities. I mean, each of these are multi-billion-dollar sectors. There's global market leaders, and we're
Mhm.
working with some of those leaders in some of those sectors. So it's, without providing the market with specific details at the moment,
Yeah.
that's next on the horizon in terms of key milestones, providing the market some visibility.
I think the re-rating of the company will really be coming once the market understands or gets notice of who you're actually working with. The size of companies will then, I think, provide people with the right idea of how significant this is. Like you said it, potash is you're talking to some of the market leaders there. It's going to be, I think, providing a lot of visibility if and when you can publish who you're effectively dealing with, or even one step further, show that you're building a project with some of those really leading firms there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think having been involved in technology companies for a long time, I think markets are very forward-looking. So,
Yeah.
in the sense of if you're to look at, say, a biotechnology company, and they don't become $100 million companies once they start earning money. These companies are typically valued on how are you tracking against your de-risking events, and what's the probability of you achieving what you're setting out to achieve. So by the time we generate, we consummate a number of transactions and we're generating these revenues, well, by then you'd be valued on a multiple of, fast growing company, 20 times earnings, and you'd get to your $100 million market cap very quickly. In the meantime, I think as we go through each of these de-risking milestones, so in terms of reputable client, completing a feasibility study, sanctioning project execution, those sorts of things are definitely, I think, key milestones on that journey. I guess if I may summarize, we've covered a lot of ground here, Sven, in terms of sort of the opportunity and where we are, but just to recap in the one slide. So essentially we have a very unique technology, and I think definitely a world-class brine processing portfolio. I think that's important to be able to extract some value. That basically answers the question, why Parkway? We're tackling very large addressable markets. So we're listing, mining, energy, desalination. These are all globally significant markets. And given how large they are, we have the luxury of being able to focus on the high value applications within those markets. Where does Parkway, through our technology portfolio, create and have the capacity to capture the most value? So we're very disciplined about that. We're working with leading strategic partners. So when we raised these funds late last year, we're very clear as to the caliber of engineering and OEM partners and even clients we're working with. So we want to deliver a first-rate solution. It requires partnerships with tier one engineering and equipment partners. On those equipment partners, we've made significant progress. We have various arrangements with a number of vendors, but for commercial reasons, we haven't provided a whole lot of detail on that to date. I think we've covered the attractive business model. I think there's a lot that would appeal to institutional investors, and that's very much a focus. We're not going to build this company by solely relying on retail shareholder support. And we've spoken about the tier one clients that we've been doing, been in discussions with for a long time, been performing piloting studies, etc. So that's what we're out to do in terms of building an attractive business, and we're doing that with a experienced and motivated team. So lots of technology commercialization experience before. We've licensed technologies to major global companies. In terms of the people building the business, there's very strong alignment with shareholders or major shareholders committed to growing the company. I've thrown in a small point about cost control, running the company with an owner mindset. I don't want to dwell on it, but I think it's important that despite being well funded, as soon as the COVID situation took hold, the board unanimously agreed to reduce salaries, salary sacrifice, reduce corporate costs to really ensure we're fit for purpose. And I think in these sorts of times, I think it's particularly important to be able to, for management teams to understand their shareholder base, to understand the market and really align themselves with shareholders to really build that confidence. So that's something I very much pride myself on. And I think in terms of some of this corporate traction, I think particularly as we've come out and provided the market with some details, particularly in terms of our engineering partner, we've been approached by the sorts of funds and institutional investors that perhaps have backed some of these sorts of companies in the past. So there's several examples in Australia of companies who were the $5 or $10 million market cap a year ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, which are now $100, $200, $300 million market cap. So enormous value is being created there, and the smart money, if you will, looking for the next water tech startup that's going to break through, really having some interesting discussions there. People wanting to know the story, make themselves available, and really get behind the story. So I think we'll have a little bit more to say about that as we execute more of our milestones. But I think that's all encouragement that I think we're on the right trajectory.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Bahay, for that extensive, let's say, tour d'horizon of Parkway Minerals. It's amazing how far you got this since you entered as an MD. I really like that you are very systematic and rigorous about how you develop this company, and we would love to see you back in Germany at one point when you're allowed to, and when we're all allowed to travel again, because there might be business here as well for you. And also, I would like to introduce you to more German-speaking investors, of course. And with that, I would really think let's keep it at this for the beginning. It's really a long session, but I think one of the advantages that we have on this platform, Green Mining, is that we can really go into depth and explain things at length. It's up to people if they want to see it at length or not, but it's very different from going to TV or doing a short interview and getting asked three or four questions. I think what I really want is that people are have the opportunity to understand what your company is about and make it transparent, make the progress that you headed to transparent and expectable. And so we're really happy to, over the next time, really follow the development of Parkway and have more, probably shorter discussions on updates. Thank you so much, Bahay, and best regards to Brisbane then.
Appreciate the opportunity, Sven. Look forward to seeing more of green mining. All the best with the new venture. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Ciao.